Hello and welcome to the Answer Yes podcast. Thank you for tuning in. You know what's awesome about doing these podcast shows is that I'm sent a new book almost every week. And unfortunately, it's hard to catch up to all the great books that I have. But once in a while, something will resonate. It's like, okay, all right, I got it. This one's going straight to the top. And that is the case with today's book and author, Matthew Dix. He's got a new book out called Someday is Today, and it's 22 actionable ways to propel your creative life. So, Matthew, thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
People they don't give themselves enough credit for how creative they actually are. And you see them do something, you're like, wow, you're so creative. No, I'm not creative. I'm like, no, actually, you really are. I don't understand why that is. I mean, let's harness what we're good at and go for it, right?
I often tell the storytellers that I work with if they do something really clever in their story and I say, wow, I love the way you turned that phrase, they'll say, oh, no, that was unintentional. I always say, take credit because you are doing amazing things that no one is ever giving you any credit for. So if someone is kind enough to give you credit for something that you really didn't do, just take it and consider it make up for all the times that, your credit was missed when you deserved it. So I believe in that completely.
Yeah, well, I really want to dig into your background and your past. It's interesting, not thinking about this show coming up today over the weekend. I had one of my clients call. She's in her late 70s, and she says, "Jim, I have such a passion for the environment and helping and making a difference, but I think maybe I need to do something." I said, "Well, Diane, why don't you write a kids book? You're so passionate about kids, and those formidable years, 5 and under. Why don't you write a kid's book about being environmentally friendly and educated at that level?" She goes, "I don't think I could ever do that." I said, "Look, give me a few minutes." So I start texting her back and forth. I said, "What's your favorite animal?" She gives me a couple animals. I said, "What's your favorite kids' names?" A couple favorite kids' names. "What are the things that you're really passionate about the environment?" Right? Next thing you know, half hour later, we've got the storyline going. She goes, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you just pulled that out of me." They have it. People have it. They just don't realize it.
Yeah, I think sometimes they don't realize it. And I think sometimes fear really gets in the way.
Yeah.
It is, that first step is scary. And quite often people are just not told enough positive things in their lives. And so they sort of move through life assuming they're not capable of doing something. And if they want to try it, that someone might sort of smack them back if they dare to take a step forward. So I think fear gets in the way. I suspect you probably did a lot of breaking down of some anxiety through that process, which was really great of you.
Yeah, well, it's fun to bring people to their true self, right? So I didn't mean to digress a little bit there. We'll talk more about those kinds of things, but I want to hear your story, where things started for you. We have a lot of entrepreneurs on the show, so you can talk about entrepreneurial endeavors or scholastic endeavors. But let's hear some background on you.
Sure. Well, I'm an elementary school teacher for the last 24 years, and I publish novels and nonfiction. And my wife and I run a business, a storytelling business. We produce shows, and I consult with, really everyone from Fortune 100 companies all the way down to Santa Clauses who have discovered that if they can tell a good story to the kid sitting on their lap in the mall, that kid will smile faster and
Yeah.
they can get that kid off their lap and they can get more customers through the line in a given hour. It turns out that no matter what you're doing, if you can tell a better story while doing it, you're going to please your clients, find more customers, make the people who are working with you feel better, all of those kinds of things. But it was a long journey. I mean, there was a time in my life when I was homeless. There was a time when I was in jail and awaiting trial for a crime I did not commit. It was a bumpy road, and I like to make sure people understand that. I came from a very impoverished background and sort of clawed my way up. But I say that a lot because I think a lot of people sort of look at someone like me and just assume I sort of started out on the mountain, and that they would have to climb up to me. And I like to remind them that I was at the bottom of the mountain not that long ago.
Yeah. Talk about those bumps because we all have them. And sometimes people let those bumps keep them where they're at. Obviously, you got over them, but what tools did you have to get over those bumps, or what did you have to learn to get past them?
Well, when I was in high school, my parents sort of made it clear to me that when I was graduating, I was to move out and start taking care of myself. And even though I was doing well in school, really well, no one said the word college to me, no teacher, guidance counselor, or parent. I think they assumed that because we had no money, I wasn't going to
Mm,
be a kid who could ever make it to college. And so I spent most of my senior year of high school really afraid that I would not have a place to live or something to eat when I graduated. So I'd watch my friends like calculating safety schools and prepping for SATs. And I didn't even know what an SAT was. So I really felt on the outside looking in. And I got lucky. I had an English teacher named Mr. Campopiano. And there was a day in November of 1988, my senior year, when he assigned us satire. And I learned what that was for the first time. And I fell in love with it. I thought, wow, I get to be rude and sarcastic in a way that people will accept and I won't get in trouble for. And so I ended up writing what I thought at the time was the greatest essay ever written in America. And I handed it in to Mr. Campo, assuming it was going to be wonderfully received. And I got it back a few days later with a B- on it. And it said on the top, not satire, too obvious. And I was so angry. And, I was one of those kids who was getting in trouble a lot. So I sort of charged to the front of the room. We went at it a little bit. And finally, he said to me, listen, read it to the class. If they think it's satire, your B- becomes an A-. But if they agree with me that it's too obvious, your B- becomes a C-, which was my first teaching lesson. Raise the stakes on kids, right?
Yeah.
So I stood in front of the class, first time I've ever spoken really in front of people in this way, and I started reading. And the third sentence in, I heard the girl who I loved throughout entire high school laugh. I made her laugh. It was like the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. And as I continued to read, more and more of my classmates began laughing until the end, everyone was sort of really loving what I had done. And so then Mr. Campos said, raise your hand if you think what Matt wrote was satire. And every hand, including his, went up. He said, on the page, it doesn't come across as satire, but you bring so much to it that it really does sound like what you were going for. So that B- became an A-. I still have the paper in this file cabinet right next to me. But that was the day that sort of everything changed for me. I made a girl laugh through my writing, which is still to this day, I still try to make my wife laugh with the things I write. And I made a teacher look silly, which is really a hard thing to do. Like boys like to think they do it, but they really don't.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I suddenly felt like I had a little bit of a future. It wasn't much. It was just like I made a B- into an A-, but I realized I wrote something and I said something. And as a result, people changed their minds about me. And so the following Monday, I came to school and I opened my very first business. I started writing term papers for my classmates, $50 for an untyped paper, $100 for a typed paper. And with the money I earned doing my classmates' assignments, I bought my very first car.
Excellent.
And that was sort of like the transformational moment for me. Since that day, I have written every single day of my life without exception. I have just decided that there might be something in the world that I can do so I don't have to be stuck at the bottom of that mountain for the rest of my life. So it's weird to have one moment sort of be so defining for a person, but for me, I will never forget it.
So did you have the courage to go on to college from that, or what transpired in that region?
So I got kicked out of my house when I was 18. I went and I lived with a couple buddies who were going to college, but I did not go to college myself at first. I didn't know how, and I had no money. And, it was a good time. I had a great time, like living the college lifestyle, absent any classes. I was managing McDonald's restaurants. I did that for about 10 years, managing various restaurants throughout New England. But ultimately, I got arrested for a crime I didn't commit. It led to homelessness. It led to some real awful experiences with violence. And, for about 18 months, I had incredible difficulties in my life, not having a place to live, awaiting for a trial. Once I was found not guilty in court, I immediately realized I need to do something with my life and I need to do it now. And so I went to college. I started getting an English degree and a teaching degree simultaneously while managing a McDonald's restaurant for 50 hours a week. It sounds ridiculous. And today, I don't know how I did it. But what I tell people is after you've been hungry and homeless and terrified for so long, nothing seems hard. And so I look back on that time and I can't imagine how I managed to accomplish all of those things in those 4 years. But I think I was just so happy to finally be on a path that would lead to something meaningful for me.
It's so incredible the things that we're capable of doing. When you suggest, working 50 hours a week and then going after those degrees, gosh, take the hunger and the homelessness out of it. You could still do it. Right, you just have a different motivator, and I just wish I wish people would understand that. They don't have to be hungry and homeless to go out and do what you just described. But for some reason, when we get ourselves into those positions, we're a little bit more driven to get it figured out. But our brains and our bodies are so capable.
They really are. I work with writers all the time, and I'll meet someone and they'll say to me, well, I can only really write between 10 and 2, and I like to be in a coffee shop, and I've got to have the right coffee and slow jazz. And I always say to them, well, aren't you lucky? Because, you know, in World War II, there were men in trenches in Europe wearing gas masks as artillery exploded over their heads with tiny little notebooks, scribbling down stories that they hoped if they lived through this battle, they might one day be able to show somebody. And Starbucks didn't exist back then, and slow jazz didn't either. So, like, aren't you lucky you live in a time when all of these parameters happened just fortunately for you? But that's what people think. They sort of like, they view getting things done as what it looks like getting things done. They sort of like, they like the idea of sitting in a coffee shop, but they don't understand the hard work of, I need to put my butt in a chair for a long period of time and fight with sentences until they're the best sentence I can possibly write. And I find that all the time. And all the things that I do is people are very much wanting to have done something, but the actual doing of it is a real barrier for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were an elementary school teacher. Did the position pick you, or did you pick the age group that you wanted to teach?
I knew I always wanted to teach because it was sort of the one safe place as a kid for me. It was the place where adults sort of saw me in a way that I wanted to be seen. When I went to college and I started getting my education degree, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to be an English teacher or an elementary school teacher. So I went back to my old high school and I spent a day with Mr. Campopiano, actually that teacher, learning what it was like to be a high school English teacher. And then I spent 2 days in my former elementary school with my elementary school teachers, learning what their days were like. And I quickly realized that if I was a high school English teacher, I would have to read a lot of bad writing over the weekends from kids who thought they were good writers, like I was when I was 17, thinking I was writing brilliance. And I thought, I just don't think I can do that. So I decided to become the elementary school teacher because I loved that age. I loved those kids. I loved their silliness. And I love the fact that, at least for me, I can speak very directly to my students and I allow them to speak very directly to me. And there isn't sort of all of that stuff, I think, that gets in the way with teenagers and all the things that they're going through outside of the classroom. So for me, it was a very wise choice.
Yeah, seems like it. My daughters they're going into first and third, and my wife will substitute once in a while at their school. They encourage it, but she always gets the high schooler. So her experience is completely different than what my kids are going through. I'm like, oh, the kids had a great day at school. How was yours? She's like, well, I was with the teenagers again. It's different.
Well, they can be challenging. I love my former students when they come and visit me as teenagers. But I also love the fact that I don't have to spend 7 hours a day with them.
Yeah, yeah. It's such an incredible responsibility to be a teacher. One of my best friends in life now was a 45-year history teacher. And
Wow.
he's in the public space now, so he hears from his students. And also what's amazing to me is he's kept in contact with so many of them, which is amazing. How do you do
me
that?
too.
But I've read a lot of emails that they sent him, with gratitude for the level of education that he gave them and the inspiration and all these things. I thought, what an incredible gift that is to give somebody, the education that you're offering.
Yeah, I am so surprised by how many of my former students are still in touch with me. I officiated the wedding of one of my former students just a summer ago. And many of them became babysitters for my kids. And some of them are now adults and genuinely my friends. Like they spend time with me in ways I spend time with regular friends of mine. Some play golf with me. It's really an unexpected benefit. But I always tell people to do that, to reach out to their teachers. During Teacher Appreciation Week this year, I wrote to 4 of my former teachers, telling them how I felt about them. One of them's in his 80s, my old French teacher in high school. He immediately wrote back to me and we've exchanged like 3 or 4 letters. And one of my college professors who I wrote to, I'm now having lunch with her later this week. I haven't seen her in 25 years, but we're going to go have lunch. And I just know how much it means to a teacher because we spend time with kids, and quite often, especially if you're an elementary school teacher, those kids don't have the understanding that a little bit of gratitude can go a long way. It's hard to get a first grader to put some beautiful words down on a page and then hand it over to a teacher. So as parents, we can do enormous things for teachers by just expressing gratitude on behalf of our kids. And then when we get old enough and wise enough to do it ourselves, I really think we should be doing those things.
Yeah. Now, at what point did your career in teaching transition into a business with your wife?
It was sort of unexpected. I was teaching and loving it, and I was writing books and, publishing them, and that was great. And then my friends started listening to a podcast called, from the Moth, a big storytelling organization here in the country. And they said to me, you should go to New York and tell a story in one of these competitions. You'd be great. They said, you've had the worst life of anyone we know. Therefore, you would probably be great at that, which is not a nice thing to say to your friend. And I sort of said yes, but I said yes thinking I'm not really going to do it. One of those yes, leave me alones, and they wouldn't leave me alone.
Uh-huh.
So back in 2009, I guess now, I went to New York and I competed in one of those competitions. It was going to be the one and only one I was ever going to do. Stood on a stage in front of 300 disaffected New York hipsters with, man buns and side eye, and told my story. And I managed to win. I got lucky, and a lot of things came together. I used to say, I found something I was good at later in life. How lucky am I?
Mm-hmm.
But my wife heard me say that once, and she said, you're an idiot. She said, you've been writing stories all your life. So that certainly helped you tell a story on stage. I own a wedding DJ business. So I've been DJing weddings for the last 25 years. So I stand in front of, 200 half inebriated people and speak extemporaneously all the time. So that helped a lot. I wasn't nervous that night. And I'm an elementary school teacher. So I stand in front of the worst audience you possibly could have, 10-year-olds, and keep them entertained throughout the day. So all of those things sort of came together that night on that stage and allowed me to win. But more importantly, I fell in love with standing on stages and speaking to people about my life and my thoughts and things that might be useful to them. And so I started telling stories in New York and Boston and then around the country. And eventually we decided we'd start something here in Connecticut. There was nothing here originally. So I asked my wife, do you want to be a part of it? And she had been so wanting to not be behind the scenes anymore, with my writing and my speaking. She said yes. And so together we launched this show at first in Connecticut, where we bring people into theaters and perform. And that expanded into a podcast. And then weirdly, people just started calling me and saying, can you help me with my company? Or can you take 13 rabbis into the woods for a retreat and teach them how to tell better stories? Or, clowns want to come to Connecticut, and can you help clowns tell better stories? So today I work with Fortune 100 companies and universities and advertising agencies and everything in between, in a way that I really didn't expect when I first took a stage and told a story in New York one night. It was really unplanned, but constantly saying yes to every opportunity as it came, even if it felt like something that was scary or I wasn't quite sure if I'd be able to pull it off.
Isn't it amazing when unexpected circumstances happen and they're exactly what we want to be doing or giving back? It's what happened with me on this podcast. I did this for my first show. I did it to increase my SEO on an online website because podcasts have great SEO. And I told my life story. My first show was my life story. And I did an outline. I'm like, okay, I'm going to record. I got 3 calls the next day from CEOs going, hey, Jim, can you help me? And I'm listening to you tell this because I think a lot of times we're in these positions, hey, can you help me? And it took my mentor, my business coach, to go, Jim, that's what consulting and coaching looks like. He goes, you're able to help others through your story. I'm like, I didn't think about that. He goes, why don't you just give it a try? Why don't you help these guys out, see what happens over the next couple months, and maybe it's something you'll do. So 4 years later, that's all I do now is consulting and helping. Sounds like yours did the same thing for you.
It really did. It's just that idea that a door is cracked open and you have a choice whether to walk through it or to close it. And I always tell people, walk through every door. Yeah. A yes can become a no. If you walk through the door, you look around and you say, this is not for me. Take a step back, close the door, and that's fine. But if you close it without ever walking through, the opportunities that people miss, I think, are just disastrous. Even things you don't want to do. I became a wedding DJ in 1997 because my DJ partner didn't like his wedding DJ and he thought we could do better. And I said, I don't really care that much about music. I don't know how to use the equipment. I've been to one wedding in my entire life. It was yours. I don't want to be a wedding DJ. And then I said to him, but I'll give it a shot because I say yes to things.
Yeah.
That DJ business led to one of my best friends who I DJ'd his wedding. I now officiate weddings. All of the experience I had in front of human beings, speaking extemporaneously, has changed my life extraordinarily. And the people I've met, the clients who I once married, but now I work with their companies, I teach in their classrooms, all of these things. I think even when something looks ridiculous and unappealing, and maybe even, something you've always avoided, I think you should at least put one foot through the door and see what it's going to be like before you close it.
I love that. I got to write that down, because we're so, apprehensive to put one foot through the door. And you know what? That might be the best door of your life, right?
Yeah. I always tell people I run to the thing that I'm frightened of most. So I recently started doing stand-up, and I realized the reason I wasn't doing stand-up comedy was because it terrified me. And I always think to myself, I'm very afraid of doing stand-up comedy, which is why I should try stand-up comedy. I'm a golfer now, like a very, very impassioned, very bad, but very impassioned golfer. But 15 years ago, when my buddy said, do you want to play golf? I remember thinking, you've all been playing all your life. I'm going to be terrible at it. And I know there's a lot of etiquette and rules I don't understand. I was afraid of it until I said, I should at least give it one try. I'll go out with you guys once and we'll see what it's like, right? Thank God I said, I'll give it a try. And so many times in my life, it has been, I don't want to do it. I don't think I'm going to like it. I don't think it's a good idea, but I'm going to put one foot through the door and see what it's like. And so often I charge through that door and discover something I never expected.
Well, I'll tell you, my golf game would look like a comedy routine. So
So you can combine the two, comedy and stand-up, golfing and stand-up together.
That's right. My friend,
mine looks like a comedy routine sometimes too. Mine is very bad and it makes people laugh.
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with that. My golfing friends used to hate me because in my career, I was the vice president of Kettle One Vodka. I sponsored the PGA Tour and Arnold Palmer and all these great golfers, and I spent time with all of them. And they're like, "And you don't even golf?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, it makes me a better business person."
Well, I work for Slack, if you're familiar with that company. I consult for them. And one of the things I do is I don't use Slack. And we've discovered that is a really valuable thing, because when we're talking about marketing and advertising this product, my lack of understanding of it allows me to be an outsider. So you can just tell them that. You can just say I was strategically remaining an outsider.
That's right. That's right. Matthew, do you have a brief story that you like to tell? We've got a few minutes left. Or is there anything that really resonates with you, or can grab my audience so that they're forced to go get your book because it's so incredible?
Well, I guess what I'd like them to be thinking about, it's not really a story, but I think it's important. As a storyteller and someone who helps people find and tell their best stories, the thing that I worry about a lot in this world is that people don't spend any time thinking about themselves in a really productive way. I think we spend enormous amounts of time thinking about our partners and spouses and children and colleagues and businesses and clients and neighbors and parents and everyone who deserves our attention. I think we give them enormous amounts of it. But I think it's rare that you find a person who sort of sits down and says, for the next 15 minutes, I'm really going to think about myself, who I am, how I got here, how I'm feeling today, what I think I want from tomorrow, what's my long and short-term goals, am I doing right in my marriage? Am I doing well for my kids? Those kinds of things. I think our lives are a blur and we don't allow ourselves that opportunity. And I think when we don't often end up on paths that we want to be on. I think people often live lives absent of decision. They end up being water, finding the path of least resistance down a mountain, rather than really choosing their path. And so I think the best storytellers in the world are slightly self-centered in a really positive way, meaning we spend a lot of time thinking about ourselves because we're deeply curious about ourselves to find the stories we want to share with others. So what I encourage people to do all the time is to clear 15 minutes a day. Tell your partner or your spouse to go get a coffee. Tell your children to leave you alone or lock them in the basement. Find a place where you can sit in peace and just think about where you are, where you're going, how you're doing in each aspect of your life, and then sort of make a decision about the direction you're headed in rather than allowing the forces of the world and the people around you to make those decisions for you. I think you'll find remarkable stories to tell. I think you'll find a deep understanding that you might not have already. But I think the most important thing is you'll be a better and more purposeful decision maker about where you're headed in life. Like we're all heading towards a horizon, but I think for most people, that horizon is entirely undefined. It is just somewhere out there. And I think we all should have like a point that we're like walking towards. That point can change. You know, you can say, well, I used to be heading over there, but now I've decided to move a little to the right. That's great. But I think most people don't really have a point that they're aiming at because they don't spend enough time thinking about themselves. You all deserve to spend time thinking about yourself. There's nothing wrong with it. And that's what I think what I would really encourage your audience to do.
I love that advice because it doesn't require anything other than the 15 minutes. You know, a little
Yeah.
solitude, maybe a pad of paper. And, you know, I'm always encouraging people to start their day out with their gratitude, you know, list of gratitude and in their day with gratitude. And even a lot of people talk about the importance of meditation. You can wrap all this into those 15 minutes and really come out a stronger person each and every day to chase after that horizon. Really, really great point to make there. If somebody wants to find you, where can they get your materials and learn more about you or hire you or find a book, all that good stuff?
Well, if they go to matthewdix.com, you can kind of find everything there. All of my books are available wherever you get books. Those are easy to find. And my wife and I produce a podcast, Speak Up Storytelling, where we air one of the stories that are told live in our shows, and then we deconstruct that story, sort of a storytelling class. We talk about what's going well and what could be improved. And you can just find that at Speak Up Storytelling wherever you get podcasts. So it's not hard to find me.
Right on. Well, I'll put your website in the show notes, and I just want to thank you for being here, and we're truly grateful for your story and what you're doing out there.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you having me.